Hey guys, Peter here to tell you about the latest from Nachtblut, Todschick, out February 21st on Napalm Records. The album has 10 tracks, 43 minutes in length, and this is the band's 7th full-length studio album. They are a German gothic metal band. When it comes to the design of this record, you have to first look at the overall soundscape of the album in order to understand how the album was put together from a track listing standpoint. This is a very symphonic, a very orchestrational heavy sounding album. And you see that immediately as the record starts because the first 3 songs depend heavily on it. The first third of the album is heavily dependent on that almost cinematic experience that their gothic rock metal sound pushes through. As you navigate down the line, you still see those elements present on every single song. It's just that they become a little bit more diluted into the fabric, into the texture of the sound of the songs. This allows them to bring other elements to the forefront, creating almost a false sense of diversity while still allowing the record overall to be very connected and to be very balanced throughout. This is the design that they put forward, and I think it's a design that allows them to lean very heavily on one element without necessarily allowing that element to become repetitive and to become predictable. As far as the sound is concerned, this album was produced by Chris Harms of Lord of the Lost. And if you're familiar with Chris's work, if you're familiar with Lord of the Lost, the moment you start listening to this album, you can see the comparisons, you can see the parallels between these two worlds. It's definitely obvious his fingerprint is on this album. But if you're going to create a record that has that symphonic backdrop, that uses a lot of orchestrational pieces, that also depends very heavily on synths and keyboards, I feel like he's the perfect guy to bring those elements into an arena where the gothic sound of the band still permeates throughout. It just gives it a different essence. It gives it a different darkness. It gives it a different mood. And this album is all about that. It's all about creating a gothic metal rock album that doesn't necessarily follow a certain predictable path. Some songs on this record have almost a new wave 80s influence. Some songs have more of a symphonic backdrop. Some songs are a little bit heavier with symphonic elements allowing the atmosphere to be a little bit bigger. So it's an album that uses the same ingredients, if you will, throughout, but then mixes them up in different recipes. And that's where that sense of diversity comes to the forefront, but at the same time allowing the record to feel very balanced throughout. The production really helps these elements come together and really helps create this sense of balance and diversity almost at the exact same time. It's a great sounding album because of it, and I felt that it allowed this album on one hand to also feel a little bit more than just one-dimensional. It has great atmosphere, it has great vibe. It's an album that at times the songs feel very narrow, very cavernous, very dark, very somber. And then there's other times where the songs feel almost cinematic, like a movie score style track. This creates those natural ebbs and flows that makes the songs and the record itself have that incredible touch and that incredible playability that you always look forward in any listening experience. The guitars on this album could have been a little bit more in the forefront. I think the element that jumps out more consistently than any other is the drums. The drums on this album, when the songs need to be heavy, they are noticeable. They are there right at the front. You can feel them. You can feel their power. You can feel their strength. When the songs don't need them as much as a leading force because it's more about the size, it's more about the volume, not necessarily the heaviness and the thickness, the drums drop a little bit more into the backdrop, allowing all the other elements to be pushed forward, but giving it enough of a surrounding, giving enough of a foundation that helps give the song that size that it needs. The guitars are the element that at times feels a little bit lost in the overall perception of what this record sounds like. And that comes across a little bit more in songs that have that symphonic orchestral piece driving the essence, because it almost drowns the guitar sound. It allows the guitar sound to dilute into that sound and not necessarily be separated or on the next lane to it. Even in tracks where the keys don't create this cinematic essence, they don't have this symphonic presence, and they have a little bit more of a dark undertone, they're still so impactful in how the song moves and how the song breathes that there's very little room for the guitars on this album to have a sense of predominance. That doesn't mean you don't listen to them. That doesn't mean you don't hear them. That doesn't mean they don't have heaviness. That doesn't mean that they don't have an impact. It's just that their impact is always minimized by everything else that helps create that larger than life experience, that larger than life sound more often than not, or even create a much better defined atmosphere, and allows them to kind of become a passenger on the overall car ride that this album offers. One element that definitely stands out is the vocal performance. I thought the vocals on this album were very emotional, very well delivered to the mood, to the tone, to the vibe of the song, using the range perfectly in terms of a little bit more of a clean vocal style, with a little bit more darkness, a little bit lower, or even bringing the vocals into a more extreme metal approach, almost reminding me of Cradle of Filth at times. There's certain songs on this record that definitely have that style, that extreme metal approach. And I felt that that was one of the elements that became really rich, because regardless of what drove the sound of the songs, regardless of the essence of the sound of the songs, the vocals always had the right outlet and had the right delivery for what that sound, for what that song was all about. Really mobile and really easy to merge into the design idea of the songs. Definitely one of the highlights of this album, and it really helps to bring the whole record together, giving it some sense of diversity, but being very consistent in the quality that it offers. And that allows me to say that I was wondering where they were going to go with this record, considering that Vanitas was one of my favorite albums, if not the favorite album that they've ever released, their previous record. I think this album sounds better. It has a little bit more sense of sequence. It has a little bit more sense of togetherness. It definitely has a larger sound. The production is way better, in my opinion. So while Vanitas was a great record with great individual songs, this album feels like there's a little bit more than just great individual songs. There's an idea behind creating individual songs that will allow the record itself to be memorable. As far as favorite tracks are concerned, I picked 3 songs to talk about that really emphasize how you can use the same elements and create very distinct tracks. I want to start off with Nachtgeweiht. The orchestrations on this track, the keys, are a massive part of the sound. This song comes in that first half, if you will, of the record, and it has that ability to really push those orchestrations and symphonic elements into the forefront on this track, creating almost a Victorian Gothic sound experience. Almost like at times it feels like you're opening a music box and that sound is coming through, specifically at the intro and at the outro. The vocals add a sinister tone to this track because overall, sonically, the song is very sinister. The chorus is heavier, thicker, bigger volume, bigger sound, bigger vocal performance, while the verses are a little bit more contained, a little bit more sinister, but still very textured. Great track from that standpoint. I love the way that it opens, and I love the way that it closes, allowing this track to come full circle. Next we have Manchmal, kommen, wieder. Now, this track offers some of the elements that we saw on the previous song, but in a different format. This is more of an 80s synth driven sound, almost like a new wave style track, but it still has a lot of melancholy that comes with the band's Gothic sound and allows that to be the main experience of the track. So here you are, still using keys, still using synths, but now you're taking the more orchestrational part of that sound away, and you're introducing a more electronic sound into the essence of the track. And I think this is where you start to see those ebbs and flows, and this is where you start to see these differences. This is a great song. I feel like it has a great chorus. The chorus is definitely a little bit bigger, a little bit heavier, with more impact from the drums and guitars and even vocals to really separate it from that more 80s new wave, almost linear, straightforward synth sound that really marks the pace and marks the tonality of the track. Allowing that chorus to come through with a punch sets the track apart, and it doesn't allow the song to feel as repetitive as it actually is. Last but definitely not least, Götterstille. This is a track that still has the symphonic elements, it still has the orchestrational pieces, but it also has a much heavier and well-defined guitar sound and drum sound. This is more of a metal track that allows the metal to come to the surface, both musically and vocally, and then uses the orchestrational side of the sound to emphasize some elements and to emphasize specifically the mood and the overall atmosphere that the track is trying to put forward. So these are three very different songs sonically, but if you really break them all down, all of them have the same elements. It's just the order in which the elements are presented, the order in which the elements are driving the track changes from track to track. And you're able to create three very different sounding songs with the exact same ingredients. And this is where the balance and diversity comes in together as one. This is it. Nachtblut with Todschick, out February 21st on Napalm Records. Let me know your thoughts on the band, on the singles. Hit me up in the comment section. I'll see you all at the next video. Take care, guys.